I went to my local garden center the other day and I had a few spaces where I could put some more tomato plants in, and while I was there I realized something. There was over 17 different variety of tomato plants, and while I was there I was probably asked by 4 or 5 different people of what tomato plants would be best for their garden. So I decided to go ahead and do this video. There's some incredible plants that are out there, but if you pick the wrong one, it'll either not produce because of the way that you're growing, or you're gonna have to fight it for the entire season. So what I'm gonna do is we're gonna go over some of those varieties that are available at your local garden centers and what fits best for you. I'm Greg from Bell's Backyard. Let's go ahead and jump right into this. So before we get into the specific varieties, let's talk about how tomato plants grow. There's 2 different ways that you're going to see a tomato plant producing its fruit. Number 1 is going to be a determinate type tomato, and you'll see that on the label when you buy your plant. The determinate type means that it's going to grow to a specific height and then produce a whole bunch of fruit in a very short window. Now there's an indeterminate type, and what that does, it is going to continue to grow and gain in height, and it's also going to produce fruit over a longer period of time, but not in a concentrated volume like you have with your determinate tomatoes. And next you're going to have the types of tomatoes. Now those are going to be broken down into about 4 categories. Number 1 is going to be your beefsteak tomatoes. Those are kind of like the superstars of the gardens, the ones that everybody wants to grow. They're going to be those large dinner plate sized tomatoes that you use in salads or you put on sandwiches. Now the next one is going to be a globe type tomato. Those are the ones that you kind of see in the grocery store that says they're on a vine. They're smaller, they're about the size of a tennis ball, maybe a little bit larger. Then you're going to have a plum tomato. Those are the ones that are shaped similar to a small little plum. And then the last one we're going to have is our cherry tomatoes. These are the ones that you'll see that are about the size of a ping pong ball or smaller. Those are the ones that are kind of a snacking tomato. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is going to be our beefsteak tomatoes. Now the beefsteak tomatoes are going to be a larger plant. They're going to grow between 10 ounces to even 1.5 pounds, and they are truly the superstars of the garden. Every gardener wants to be able to brag that they grew a tomato the size of a dinner plate, or one slice covers an entire slice of bread. There is some drawbacks to having the beefsteak tomato depending on where you live. Number 1, they do require to be in the ground because it is a larger plant. Number 2, since it takes them a little bit longer to grow, they're susceptible to more of the soil-borne illnesses, and also they're under pressure from pests a lot longer. But depending on the type of variety you pick, you can grow them successfully in your garden. Now here in zone 8B, what I chose was the Cherokee Purple tomato. Now the Cherokee Purple tomato was introduced by the Native Americans back in the 1800s in the Tennessee Valley region, and then it was introduced into the tomato commercial growing industry in about 1980 or so. Now this particular tomato is going to produce a really dark, dusky type tomato that's going to be between 8 to 10 ounces. It does very, very well in the southern parts of the United States, from the Tennessee region and more towards the south. That would be the one that I would pick. If you're in the northern region, there is a tomato plant that's called the German Queen that I absolutely love, and it doesn't get a lot of the affection that it should. It was brought over in the 1840s by a man named Michael Ott, and then it was introduced into the tomato commercial growing industry at around 1910 or 1920. It was designed and was grown in the Bavarian region in Germany, so it does incredibly well into your northern climates. Now this is a indeterminate type tomato, so you are going to get a continual growth throughout the season, and they do very, very well in the northern United States. Now there's 2 other types of beefsteak tomatoes that I really enjoy. One of them is called the Big Boy and the other is called the Better Boy. Now the Big Boy was developed in the 1940s by the Burpee Seed Company, and it is that classic tomato that you're used to seeing, that big red juicy beefsteak that you have on your tomato sandwiches. This is an incredibly good tomato. It's going to grow between 10 to 12 ounces. The other one is another one called Better Boy. Now Better Boy was developed in the 1960s by the Petco company, and it was designed to be a little bit better than the Big Boy. It is a little more disease resistant as far as the mosaic viruses, and also a little bit more resistance to some pests. So if you want to give a hybrid type determinate tomato a shot, these would be the 2 that I would pick. Now for those of you who are in the deep south, let me introduce you to the Amelia tomato. Now this was introduced in 2004 in San Antonio, Texas. It was developed for the southern United States. It is incredibly disease resistant and incredibly pest resistant. As a matter of fact, it's only available in Texas, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, and South Carolina. Did I say Georgia? It's available in Georgia if I didn't say Georgia. It grows incredibly well in the hot summer temps. If you are in the deep south, this is a globe tomato that I would definitely put into my garden. Another great selection for your globe type tomato is going to be your Better Bush. Now this is a determinate hybrid also that's going to produce fruit in about 60 to 68 days. It is a very sturdy plant that does well in high temps. It also grows well in your container gardens, your raised garden beds, and also into your garden soil. At the end of this video, I am going to introduce you to my favorite globe tomato. It is the perfect tomato that every gardener should be growing in their garden, whether you're in the south or whether you're in the north, whether you're in a container, raised garden bed, or in the garden. It provides some things that no other tomato plant is going to be able to provide for you. But let's get right into our plum tomatoes. Now the majority of your plum tomatoes, they're going to be a determinate hybrid type, which means they're going to grow to about 2.5, 3 feet tall, and in a very short window produce a whole bunch of fruit. The majority of the gardeners will use these guys for your creating tomato paste, creating your salsas, or canning your stewed tomatoes. They're incredibly good and very prolific in the garden. Now you can grow these in a container, but that container needs to be at least 12 inches tall and 12 inches deep in order for it to be successful. Raised garden beds, they're absolutely fantastic. In the garden, perfect. My choice, hands down, bar none, no other type is any better. Prove me wrong if you want to, or leave it in the comment, is the Roma tomato. These guys are beefy. There's not a lot of liquid in them. They are perfect for stewing and canning. I put these guys in the garden for one specific reason, and that's for my stewed tomatoes when I can. Each one of these plants is going to produce between 10 to 20 pounds of tomatoes. I know that every 7 quarts that I produce will require 25 pounds of these guys. So it takes me between 2 to 2.5 plants in order for me to get my 7 quarts. Now I have a dozen plants that are in here, so I'm probably, if my math is correct, I'm going to have about 40 to 45 quarts of my stewed tomatoes. Hands down, Roma, those are the ones that you want to use. Now your cherry tomatoes. These are the ones that are going to be the size of a ping pong ball or smaller. They're the ones that you're going to use in your Italian pasta dishes and also in your salads. And they're just a great snacker. Now, you guys don't freak out at me because this guy, even though he's a vining tomato, hasn't been staked yet. There's a reason why I haven't done that, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. But if I'm going into the ground, number one choice, hands down, north or south, is going to be your super sweet 100s. Now, these guys are going to grow between 4 to 5 feet tall, and they're going to produce clusters that are between 15 to 20 of these gorgeous super sweet tomatoes. Now cherry tomatoes do require a trellis. Now I know some of you are freaking out because this guy is so tall and he hasn't been trellised yet, but there's a reason for that. Now my soil temps, as soon as they hit 60 degrees, I put these guys into the ground to see how quickly I could get them to produce. But there was still that chance of a light frost or some severe storms that were coming through. As a matter of fact, yesterday we had tornadoes just south of us. But what I do until they get to this size, I am not going to stake these guys up. The reason being is if there's a light frost that's coming, or if there's the severe threat of thunderstorms or tornadoes, what I do is just take my handy dandy Home Depot bucket, I'll put it right on top of it, and I'll cover it up. Usually that only happens in the early part of our growing season, but once he gets to be about that tall, then the trellis is going to come out and I'm going to start staking him up. Now, if you're a patio gardener or a container gardener and you want to have some cherry tomatoes, there is a plant for you, and that's called the Husky Cherry. Now, the Husky Cherry is a very sturdy plant, and it is indeterminate. Now, it'll grow to 4 feet tall, so it's still going to need to be staked, and the pots need to be at least 12 inches wide and 12 inches deep. Fantastic plant for you container gardeners, and it also grows really well into the warmer months. Now, before we talk about the tomato plant that I said that every garden should have, if you have a different experience, a different type of tomato that you like to grow in your zone, leave in the comment section below. Just leave your zone, the type of tomato, and what your experience has been so you can share it with the community. But let's go to my favorite tomato that every garden should have, and that's the early girl. The reason why I think every garden should have at least one early girl tomato plant in their garden, number one, it's a hybrid determinate tomato. It grows well in the north, in the south. It also grows well into the high temps. It'll produce tomatoes even 90 degrees or above. But the real reason why I like it so much is the Early Girl, because of its name, is one of the fastest producing tomato plants that's on the market. Now this plant's going to produce tomatoes within 50 days. So I know me as a gardener, when I go for my big beefsteak tomatoes here, like my Cherokee Purples, they're not going to be ready for 68 to 75 days, and it kills me not being able to harvest tomatoes. My Early Girl is going to be able to produce some tomatoes for me at a very early stage. Second way you can use it, let's say like we had yesterday, tornadoes came through, high winds or disease, and you lose part of your garden and you need to restart. That Early Girl is going to allow you to go even mid-season to be able to put tomato plants into the ground and be able to harvest before the season's over. Now guys, I hope these selections helped you, and I hope this video provided some type of information that you can use. That's the purpose of our channel. I hope that you found it useful. I'm Greg from Bell's Backyard, and I'll see you in the next video.